while I was in high school, I did an internship program with, it actually turned out to be with the State Parks Department, the New York State Parks Department, but I was in their architectural and engineering office, and I did sort of a summer there and worked with an architect, worked with some engineers, got to see how a little bit about how that world worked and a little bit about how a state-funded agency works. Um, and then I started to take some drafting classes in high school, both hand drafting and computer drawing, um, and went to eventually applied to the University of Buffalo, which had at that time it was a 25-year-old architecture program that they were kind of revamping. So I really feel like I got a great opportunity with Buffalo. And with Buffalo, it was a very demanding class, like 200 students entered in freshman year and like 60 finished the freshman year. Undergrad and grad school at Buffalo, and I worked at a couple of different firms along the way. And when I graduated, I moved out to Boston, where I am now. I'm actually, and I worked for before working for myself. I worked for three firms here in Boston, and the first firm was like a 6 or 7 person firm that in 2001, 2002, unfortunately had to downsize quite a bit, and we were eventually just three people for a while. And I think I was able to stay because I was fresh out of school. I was cheap, right? Like I was the lowest salary. And I was also the producer. I was the one who was doing the drawings. I understood how the computers worked. I understood how the software worked and everything. And after about 4 years, I decided I wanted to work for a larger firm. And I went to a 20-person firm, which over the course of the time that I was there went from 20 to about 50 people. And initially, while I was there, I was kind of focused on like, oh, okay, there's a lot of cool people around here, a lot of people my age, people in their 20s and early 30s. And I was kind of just thinking about that. But at a certain point, I started to think more about like what the future of my career would be. I had gotten licensed, which is an interesting process. So while I was with this firm, this sort of 20 to 50 person firm, they were growing, and I was seeing openings in the firm, spaces where that could be filled by somebody if they wanted to. So like I would be working on my projects, was learning how to manage projects. I was going from being a drafter to more interfacing with clients directly. And I was also recognizing that there was like a shortfall, a shortcoming in the software that we were using, and Autodesk acquired a software called Revit, which was actually invented in a suburb of Boston here, and it's a fully parametric three-dimensional software that updates very quickly. And so you could make a change in one drawing, like you could add a window in one drawing and have it appear in many other places, the other drawings that you need it to appear in. And I saw that the firm that I was working with had a shortcoming because they weren't using software like this. And I sort of took it upon myself to learn about it and advocate for it. And then also, when the ownership of the firm decided that they were going to go for it, I also sort of took it upon myself to like really, really like get the training and begin to train other staff in the firm. And I really recommend that for anybody who is working for someone else right now, you think you might want to work for somebody in the future or have more of a leadership position in the firm that you're in now, look for the empty spaces or the blank spaces that um, you understand could make a difference. Maybe it's the thing that personally frustrates you about the company, um, and get in there. And I think that you can kind of wedge in there and make the space more and create a larger space. I mean, it was going through a lot of changes because, like any firm that's going to grow like that, any company that's going to change that way from 20 people to 50 people, there's going to be changes. You end up, you're in a room with 50 people. When it's 20 people, you kind of feel like you know everybody and you kind of know what all their projects are. But when it's 50 people and some of it's interior design, some of it's architecture, you start to lose track of who's who, you know, who's married, who's not, who's got kids. Over the course of about 14 years, I worked for that company. I saw a lot of changes. I was able to help with a lot of changes. I felt like I wanted to be more and more of a leader there, but I also felt a little bit hampered in or a little bit closed in by what was going on there. Um, and it became time for a change. They at that time, at the time that I worked there, I went from being, 28 and single to being in my 40s and married and three kids and owning a house and having a different commute because I'd moved from, the office was in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is sort of very similar to downtown Boston. I had a 10-minute bike ride to get to work. It was great. But by the time I left, I was living out here in Natick. It's 20 miles away. That commute could be an hour and a half. It was also taking away from time with my family. Like I'd get in the car at 6 o'clock and maybe I'd be home at 7:30. I'm missing dinner. I'm not supporting my wife, who was also working. I'm not doing my share with the kids and things like that. So I shifted to another firm, which ended up being a four person firm that was closer to where I live now. And there was a conversation about this to try to loop back to not just my story, but to entrepreneurship. There was a conversation about an ownership transition and sort of me buying in. And we never really got to the right terms. And we came to a point this last summer where it just sort of made sense that in order for me to do what I want and for them to do what they want, we needed to go separate ways. At that point, I was already engaged and I knew a little bit about the operations side of work, of running an office, which is an important thing I didn't bring up before, but like they don't really teach you that in architecture school, or at least they didn't in 1995 to 2000 when I was in school. Um, which is it's a real hopefully other schools do it, but at Buffalo there just wasn't a lot. There wasn't a focus on it. The focus was on design. Yeah, billings and payroll and how contracts are arranged, all that stuff. Like even like the structure of a company. Are you an S corp? Are you a B corp? Are you a not for profit? Are you employee like all those things? These are all just vague terms to me even now. And it probably would have been good at some point for me to like go get an MBA or something like that, but it was just not something that I ever did. So I learned all this stuff sort of along the way. And I think that's actually been really interesting. Let's sort of help keep my career interesting is that there's always been a lot of area to learn. And like I was saying before, like finding a blank spot in um, in in the firm or a spot that's not being filled. I did that with timekeeping software at one of the firms I was working at. It was like, well, there's so much potential here, and all we're really doing is timesheets and expense reports. So I dug in and I learned more about how we could use it to plan time for people going forward so that we could say, like, okay, well, in 6 months, what does our staffing need to be and things like that. I wasn't ever sure that this is where it was going to lead, that it was going to lead to me starting a company and working on my own. I knew that I wanted to be a leader. I knew that I wanted to um, run a company, but I didn't always know if it was like, oh, take that sort of adventuresome entrepreneurial, strike out on my own kind of a thing, or if it was sit in a more comfortable spot and work my way up and become the owner. And circumstances sort of led me to I don't really think of myself as like striking off and like an explorer heading west or something like that. I don't really think of myself that way. That like we kind of got to this point where we understood that we're going to diverge, and that owner of that company was really supportive of that. And he said, well, you've developed relationships, you've brought in clients that are your clients. And he said, well, you can take those clients to start to either go to another firm or start your own firm. And I knew in that moment that like, I didn't want to work for somebody else. I didn't want to go back to who I was working for before. And I also didn't want to take the risk of going to somebody who seems nice on, let's say, the first date, and maybe over time you realize, oh, isn't all that great. They're not as supportive to work-life balance as maybe I would want to be, or they want you to design in a certain way or take in certain kinds of clients, or, I didn't really want to follow somebody else's path. I wanted to do my own path. And so very quickly over the course of like June and July, I got into talking with an attorney, figuring out the right structure of the company, figuring out what paperwork I had to do with the state and with the federal government, um, which is, I'm sure you all know, uh, not a straight line and not something that moves very quickly. Like I'm 4 months into this right now. It was August 1st that I went off on my own, and now it's, December 11th. So it's only been 4 months. And so to say, like, am I successful? Am I not successful? Too soon to say, right? I'm getting paid. We're paying the mortgage. We're buying the kids Christmas gifts, stuff like that. And on those regards, and those metrics, so far so good. The success is there. But is this going to work for another year, 5 years, 10 years? Man, I hope so. Addition and renovations, and I'll do new build residential work, but we don't get a lot of that here. Where like in Eastern Massachusetts, there's not a lot of new land. There's not a lot of empty space to build on, and it's pretty expensive to do that. The people who are doing that tend to be developers, but there's not a lot of people who are buying a piece of land in a town like Natick or Newton or Wellesley or even in Boston for, $1 million for just the land, for land in a house that they're going to knock down and then spend multi-millions on a new house. It's just not something that's happening all that often because a lot of the housing stock here is 50 to 100 years old and just hasn't been renovated very much and is not set up for the way that modern families live. People want more than one full bathroom in the house. What I really want to do is improve the homes that people live in, however it makes sense for them to do it. I'm not somebody who has like a vision of like, I'm going to reinvent architecture, change the world with architecture. I really just want to change things for individual people as I go through. And sometimes that's, I'm kind of what I'm thinking about is a lot of what I've been talking about is a lot of sort of young family sorts of issues, but I also have done some work for people that is more tied to like aging in place, adding elevators and accessibility and things like that. And certainly that would be something that would be applicable to wounded veterans and things like that. The way that I work, I don't think I spend an inordinate amount of time on the business. And I think it's because um, I've got good software support for it. There are, I think with the explosion of the internet and the tech boom and all those things, whatever the right term for it is, I think that a lot of newer companies have been able to come in and provide high quality products that really help run your business. It really is the business that I'm getting now is because I did a good job 10 years ago, a good job on a project. Not that I was like, oh, a suave, you know, entrepreneur 10 years ago. It was just, I just did good work for people because I wanted to do good work for people. And they have come back. I have one client who has come with me across now three firms, and he's shared my name with other people. And I've got another, a couple other clients that I did the best I could for them in 2016, and they are giving my name to their neighbors as their neighbors want to do things. Right. So maintaining good relationships for with builders is really important because sometimes a homeowner calls the builder and says, I just don't know what to do here. I know I need a better kitchen. I know I need a garage. I know I need whatever, but I don't know what to do. And then that builder says, Andy's your guy, right? Like a more important skill for an architect than being a beautiful drawer, like a beautiful painter or sculptor or any of these things that you might associate with what an architect or an artist might do is being able to communicate. And if you can't, you can have this most amazing idea for something, and if you can't communicate it well, it'll never get built.